and my life. Are we going to do that again? Good afternoon, everyone. I am here, even though I said I wouldn't be. Because I just don't have a schedule. My concept of time is gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. Right, so here we are. And today's session is really important and really deep and might be a bit triggering, right? Some of this is very deep and very heavy today. And yes, I am being diabolical. I've got a sideways ponytail that I haven't brushed, right? And I'm also wearing the same jumper I was wearing in the last video. I have gone to the dogs. What is wrong with me? Now, I'm going to go on and share this video straight away because it's called I Trust Me, Letting Children Choose and Why It Matters. And it has an enormous, very important, very powerful message about ADHD child development and why the body-mind connection as a process should be adhered to for optimal health and well-being for ADHD children. What happens if we don't apply it, if we don't come from that perspective, essentially. Now, I am attempting to screen share as per. It's a whole hullabaloo for no reason, right? So just give me a second while I get set up. So I didn't intend on coming on, but this came out of me quite quickly after a good few days of sitting down and deeply reading into dissociation, right? And if there is any video inside of the series that I have done, and this is number 12, this is probably one of the most important ones, and I've made it nice and simple so everyone can access everything in here for supporting children with ADHD. So, I Trust Me, Letting Children Choose and Why It Matters, Part 12 in the BodyMind Connection series on ADHD child and learning development. If you want to watch the rest of the series, it's all public on YouTube. There's a bunch of it. You are very welcome to get stuck in there. It's all free. Now, how is identity formed? Let's break it down. ADHD children as a whole are designed very sensitively. Their nervous systems are sensitive, their brains are sensitive. As a result, connection to their own bodies, mind and body connection, is unstable, as well as low vagal tone causing that, and then also the multiplicity of information that moves through them at any given moment. So they're very prone to overwhelm, prone to overload, and they're battling with an internal system that is constantly active. So their immediate environments are more likely to override their body signals. The very root crux center point of the body-mind connection process as a child development and learning theory is that we maintain that connection to self, and we teach the ADHD children through various measures that their own bodies, their own messages, their own self is safe to connect to. And I'm about to explain why, and it is going to blow your minds, and there's an awful lot to this. It's very intense, right? So sit down, make a cup of tea, have a wee cold cloth if you need it, maybe a bit of chocolate. Pause me until you're ready, because this is going to land. It's going to land hard, right? Okay. Now, how is identity formed? Let's break it down. Now, I've helpfully put on the side there some pictures, but I'll be honest, for the rest of this presentation, I have not put pictures because the information is so important, and I just wanted to get it out here. We have a sunflower and a blue tit. Now, this is significant, right? The sunflower is my little boy's favourite flower, and the blue tit is his favourite bird. I don't know why. These are the choices that he's made. Now, a lot of this is about choice today and how choice informs how neurology evolves. And choice also in the early years of a child's development helps them to reflect safely on their own body processes and their own nature. And I want us to start with this premise. Our original nature that we're born with is our true nature, and very often we get veered away from it, but we are all going back to it. And I've got a funny wee slide at the end to reinforce that point. Now, exploration through choice, developmentally fitting challenges, and creative sensory safe experience. That's part of identity formation. Safe, consistent, attuned caregiving in response to our needs and requests. That, major for identity formation. Repeated experiences where our body signals and our choices are permitted to be felt, expressed, and aligned. Right? All three of those regularly. Right? Consistent validation of our emotions, experiences, choices, and perceived reality. My son's left a fidget toy on the desk, and I have never been happier in all my life. I never use these, but I am definitely stealing this one. This is wonderful. Right, I'm going to keep this forever. Do you know what it is? I asked him earlier, is this a snake? And he said, no, it's a stretchy lamb. Honestly, don't look too hard at these fidget toys because they'd freak you out. Some of the way they're built are crazy. So I'm trying to make jokes, right? Because I know what I'm about to present to you is a lot, right? And it's quite triggering for me, if I'm honest, because I deeply, deeply, intrinsically understand what I'm about to share with you here, and I know it's going to be tough for others to hear as well. And I just want to extend the biggest pile and heap of love, and I want you to know that everything that's here is so simple and effective. When we have love in our hearts, we're always doing the right thing for our children. So I just want to say that before we begin. So how is identity disrupted? Let's make this really, really clear, alright? Rushed, pushed, forced, limited, or disrupted choice for children. Challenges which are too much for the developmental age and stage. We talk about stages here with the body-mind connection theory, where it's, are they in the connection to self stage, connection with others stage, or connection with the world stage? It's dependent on amount and variability of their nervous system capacity, right? And that can change day to day. Sensory overload without relief or respect to that sensitivity. Ignored, shamed, or punished needs or bids for connection, self-expression. Repeated experiences where our body's signals are overridden, ignored, denied, or overwhelmed by negative emotion. Invalidation of our perceptions, experiences, preferences, safety, or reality. No recovery time or acknowledgement of any of the above. Okay, so all of that causes identity disruption in the long term. And I'm going to go into that now in a bit more detail. Okay, if you've started reading that, I'm not speaking to you because I didn't say you could start reading that yet. No, I didn't, right? How, oh, I've done it again. Hold on one second. Please excuse me. I am trying really hard to do all of this right. How do ADHD children cope? Self-knowledge, safety, and integrated emotional growth are lost. So when identity disruption begins to occur, here's what happens inside of the child. They are constantly and consistently seeking connection, right? And they may not be consciously aware of it, but the connection should be coming from themselves first and then from others, right? But as children, there's a struggle or a disconnect between that, so they need others to reconnect them to themselves. And this is one of the primary difficulties that ADHD children have. When the body, the person with them, or the environment threatens their safety, their means of coping is to disconnect from themselves immediately, right? And this will feel like they've literally come up and out of their bodies. They won't be aware of this. And this is the major thing. They're not aware of this, so it's going to be up to us to be aware of it. They will frantically do anything necessary to re-establish a sense of safety again. But because they're out of their bodies at this point, it's now outside sources. Their entire will, their beingness, their well-being, their sense of safety is now outsourced. And if they're in an unsafe environment or one that is not allowing them to be authentic and does not know to return them to themselves, they will repeatedly come out of body and start to create a cycle that's very unhealthy. But let's go into it. When this becomes a chronic effort, this trying to seek connection externally, right? Dissociation, zoning out, masking, and more deeply, complete structural dissociation occurs. Children can experience cognitive dissonance, which is a split mind or split reality, and begin denying their own internal reality and true selves entirely in favour of somebody else's viewpoints, somebody else's reality, somebody else's narrative. Their safety becomes dependent on other people. For example, if they have a primary caregiver who is unsafe or inconsistent in their safety, they will start to, due to what their body's doing, where they're coming up and out of it, copy and mirror that person, right, and their preferences and their needs, and deny their own internal experience in order to feel safe, right, temporarily. It's not a real safety, it's a temporary one, and the emotional build-up occurs and loads of complications follow that. Now, children can experience cognitive dissonance. That's when there's a split, right? They decide they are wrong, their own body signals are wrong, their own perceptions are wrong, their own opinions are wrong, their own preferences are wrong, rather than the external world or the caregiver, because it's too much for them, right, to process differently. And this is sort of the root of where trauma comes from. And trauma in children comes from fear, right, shock, overwhelm, horror in their early years and beyond that, but most especially in their early years before the age of 5 or 7, right? And this is sort of the beginning with ADHD children of structural dissociation. They are more prone to this because of the instability in the vagal and the autonomic nervous system, the rigidity and the heart rate variability, and also due to their emotional dysregulation being so intense. They need assisted through all this, and they need awareness of all this and awareness of themselves most of all and first, which is why the first phase of BodyMind Connection is connection to self. This is when their real selves, if this keeps happening, where they keep becoming dissociated, right, which means coming out of body, disconnecting from the body essentially, in order to cope with overwhelming emotion or overwhelming experiences outside of them that they are not developmentally ready for. Their real selves are chronically shoved to the back in favour of temporary relief by masking and meeting others' needs rather than their own. Emotional overwhelm increases as the body and mind continually are fighting contradictory experiences. So this is where the disconnect comes from, where the mind and the body are no longer friends then. The body is telling the truth inside of the child. The child's experience is valid. What they are experiencing from their environment and from within themselves is very real, right? And when it is repeatedly denied, they start to self-deny, self-erase, and this completely disrupts their neurological development and the development of their nervous system, right? And it is exclusively for ADHD children here that I speak, because the research has proven that the propensity for or the occurrence of dissociative problems and structural dissociation long term is much higher within them, right? And this is something that we can prevent, right? Which is why I'm talking about it today. Trust in self, other in the world is lost, and the nervous system is in constant survival mode. So that's adaptive stress response, that's ill health, that's all this stuff. Now, here's the split, right? So these are the two different situations that are occurring. In the red here is what is happening for ADHD children the world over who remain undiagnosed, or they're in situations where their ADHD is denied. They're in environments that are not friendly or supportive of. They're not in care communities because of the intensity of their needs, and they are surrounded by people who are not properly informed, right? This is what starts to happen for them, okay? So first of all, there's number one, emotional dysregulation. And what is emotional dysregulation? It's when the body is building up full of emotion, right? And emotion becomes overwhelming or intense. It is not the child's responsibility to manage that, right? When they are young, they can't do that on their own. Stress that, okay? So emotional dysregulation is number one. Number two is disconnect. So that's what they do to cope. Out they come, right? Don't want to feel that, that's bad. And the messaging internally is, I am unsafe and feeling is unsafe. I hope you're reading the red box with me. Don't mean to patronise. I used to be a secondary teacher, I can't help it, right? No co-regulation or validation is provided. And then number three, they go to this, mask and suppress. I am still unsafe, I am unlovable, I cannot feel again. And that's what they're teaching themselves. They have a big feeling, they disconnect, they're like, okay, I feel slightly better, out of my body, just acting like everything is fine. And they suppress the feelings, and they become dissociative and zoned out and uncomfortable, and this emotional build-up begins internally that causes loads of problems. Also, they never learn about their ADHD profile. Because of this cycle of masking and suppression, they may be perceived to be fine externally, right? And they have no self-knowledge afterwards. What emotional processing does, when it is allowed to happen safely in safe environments, it teaches the child about their intrinsic self. It teaches the child that emotions are safe and their connection to their body is restored more quickly and more easily. And they begin to cope better with varying stages or states of emotional dysregulation. It becomes part of their normal everyday, not something that puts them into a state of alarm, right, and keeps them in alarm. What may look externally to another as a child is fine, child is not fine, right? So the proper way of doing it, right, body-mind connection version over here in the green. Number 1, emotional dysregulation occurs. 2, disconnect. Out they come from the body. I am unsafe and feeling is unsafe. I don't like this. Nope, bye. I'm away, right? And it'll come across like they're out of it, right? Or they might split immediately, but I'll talk about that in a second. So number 3, processing emotion safely. So they get that choice. They might have someone to co-regulate with them, someone there who names the emotion with them, right? Says, okay, what's that feeling you're having? And they depersonalize that. I talked about that in the last video, right? And slow the breath, have feelings and needs validated, let them express their feelings. There's a gentle and lengthy recovery time, very important, right? Feelings are safe, I am loved, I know myself better, the world is safe. This needs to be happening a lot. Sometimes it doesn't happen all the time, but it needs to happen a lot for the child to learn from within oneself. Now that is the tagline for the body-mind connection theory. There is an entire background system of connecting and learning happening inside the child when they are allowed to process emotions safely. When that does not occur, the mind and the body do not correlate and they stay in a state of disconnect. The worst case scenario, when disconnect becomes chronic. I don't like this slide, I don't like to talk about it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right, so the ADHD child who is denied their true self and experience may start to split over time. This means they unconsciously perform at being okay. Now these performances, because they're effortful and not rooted in their natural biology, they're quite literally head-based performances. They're not very stable. So when the body, which is the deeper, truer state, starts to override it, loads of madness happens. These performances begin to replace their true nature and personality, but the true nature and personality is actually suppressed underneath a lot of pain. And when old pain resurfaces with a certain trigger, right, and especially if there's a lot of trauma, right, if there's a lot of trauma in the past, these triggers can be very small. The body registers that as a threat, literally registers the feeling of emotion as a threat. So they shove the emotion down again and again and again. Reality begins to split, and so do they, right? There is a narrowing of consciousness in the field of consciousness, and there's a narrowing in the perception of reality when survival is the state of the nervous system. When the autonomic nervous system is in a permanent state of survival, our perception narrows, right? There's literally this fantastic thing that happens inside of children who begin to develop structural dissociation, where they can compartmentalize stress and also compartmentalize fact. I suffered with this. Because of early experiences, I learned to create a reality that I made conscious and compartmentalize everything that was painful, because I couldn't, right, wasn't able to process the build-up of emotional pain that was sitting inside of my body. I would split off with certain triggers, and I would shift from one identity state to the next, right, in order to avoid a full 360 perception of a terrible situation. I was bypassing in the extreme, but on a deep unconscious level, and my identity was extremely fractured as a result. It weakened me. I was very, very vulnerable, right? And when the apparently normal personality, right, which is what I'm going to talk about now, the one that you prefer, the conscious self, right, is active, there are lots of little ones on the back called EPs, emotional personalities, that are more attuned to the old trauma, the old pains that have not been processed. And this is all very typical of ADHD children. This is something that ADHD children can develop really easily, which is why I'm speaking about it now. And it's very important to speak on it. So these EPs when there's a trigger, will overtake because of the amount of memory and emotion that they're holding that's being denied. So the brain, initially the brain is just splitting off from one trigger and incident. When that becomes a multiple trigger and incidents, there is a whole personality and whole identity, a neural network holding that compartmentalized reality in place. And when the apparently normal personality, the one that dominates, is weakened on any level, out comes the EP, right? So we see the young, unevolved, fragmented part, right? And these can develop over time, right? Multiples of them, right? And this then becomes structural dissociation, where a person's core self is here, and then they have this whole literal circus team of individual personality selves that they are moving through unconsciously in order to avoid the build-up of emotion internally. Really quite shocking, right? And the fact that it is so common, and that ADHD children are most pronounced in this way, that they have a propensity towards this, is incredibly serious, and it needs to be talked about, which is why I am today. So those EPs, right, are the fractured and denied parts of the self which were provided no safety to be expressed in the past. The conscious self loses memories, right? These memories belong to the EPs. These memories belong to the younger selves, right, that are subconsciously running reality in the background. So they'll be in the unconscious self, the id, they'll be in the buried bits, right, but they'll pop out in conscious awareness from time to time. And it looks like multiple sets of identity inside of one person. And this is very common. If you sit and think about this, right, I guarantee people are listening to this and going, I have definitely been through this myself. It's like, yes, you have. Of course you have. The world that we are living in right now, right, to whatever degree that this has been experienced, it's possible and it's common. Because our understanding of the internal self is very, very limited, and our world is not designed to support that. So the conscious self will lose memories, they'll have unplanned flips between identities if triggered, and suffer internal identity confusion. So there's multiple choices being made from a head-based perspective, which I've spoken about before, where their information is coming from the external world instead of from inside of their own self now, right? And they'll flip through these false identities trying to satisfy them, make them more real, make decisions based on those false selves, and end up in lives that just do not fit them, right? And it's incredibly painful. It's a very, very difficult thing to sit with, and a very, very difficult thing to resolve after a long-term period of suffering like this. It's very painful. But if we treat the children and we offer the children their autonomy and their support now, right, this is less likely to occur. But so we're aware, let's talk about it a bit more. So split identities begin to run the experience rather than the authentic feelings, nature, and body signals. In fact, when the body signals now, right, when structural dissociation is in place, it feels like an alarm is going off and the child disconnects further from themselves. Different environments will require different masks to suppress their feelings, and therefore the performance gets increasingly more complex. So how is this different from ADHD zoning out and forgetfulness? Zoning out can be part of ADHD attempts to regulate or relax the nervous system. If a child is out of body, they're not aware of themselves, and there is a level of avoidance happening there, right? It is only sometimes okay, and can be considered, if we see dissociation on any level, it can be a cue that emotions are not being processed or something needs met internally. Something is sitting in there that has popped them out of themselves that needs to be addressed. Bringing awareness to the body and offering interactive practices to reconnect the body again is always preferable to letting a child routinely and constantly tap out of the reality in front of them. This is why screens, and I had this problem as well. I am resolving this as we speak. It's something I am doing much less of. Screens are detrimental to neurological and nervous system health in children. It is a means of bypassing the process of healthy reconnection to the self, as I've spoken to before, which we all need all day long. So if you're an adult watching this and you're going, I'm a big person and I can relate to all of this, by all means take it, because there are going to be countless numbers of us out there who are deeply sensitive, who have been living like this and have no idea. So depth of time perception and screen time. Interoception is the brain's ability to notice the body's signals. With screens as an immediate response to emotions or triggers, we lose this interoception and choose numbing out instead. Everybody listening went, doom scroll! It's like, yep, that's exactly what that is, right? Over time, our brains and bodies lose connections to each other more and more, and we don't notice, right? The fast-paced and very triggering nature of the content we see on our phones, for example, right? That's keeping the nervous system and the brain on high alert, but the body's in a numb state. So we're outside of our bodies, and it is teaching us to disconnect or dissociate in front of certain media, and also it's teaching us to become to dehumanize, because we are teaching the brain to register most information in two-dimensional states. And what is two-dimensional is not human. Ooh, there is a weight behind that statement. I'm not going to say any more there because it'll take me away from what I want to say. So, the fast-paced nature of a screen time keeps the nervous system in high alert, and children lose a vital sense of meaning, place, and space. Their perception of time decreases, and they become less aware of themselves and the world around them on a long-term basis, given their brains are still developing. So their sense of time becomes shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and their nervous systems are more and more dysregulated. It's not good, right? So literally being outdoors under a sky for an extended period is very good for the brain and the body to reconnect. And screen time is fine in very small doses when it's interactive to a degree. Interactivity sort of resolves all of this for children who are still developing. Now, here are some examples of things you can do. Now, I mentioned before naming the emotions, feeling them out, and reassuring a child whilst they feel them out is the primary one, but I've spoken about that at length in other videos, so I haven't focused on that specifically in this particular section. But I am going to give you other suggestions today. So, all about me. Making the child's experience or part of a child's everyday all about them. If not every experience all about them. Because they need that. That's why they are the way they are. So green time is loads of time outdoors. It replenishes neurotransmitters. It gets children off of two-dimensional perception, opens them up into depth of perception, both time, space, meaning, significance, place in the world. All of that's very important for the whole body and every cell to feel it. You know, that they're in a big planet and there's people in it and they can live, breathe, feel, see, taste, touch everything. You know, like that's so important. It keeps their hearts connected, keeps their bodies connected. They can sense themselves in positive ways. Green time is so healthy, right? Favorites lists. I've started doing that recently with my son, and I want to explain this in detail. So, I didn't start developing like sincere preference until last year. Right, moving on quickly from that. Now, I have favorites lists for him now, right? Where we have a favorite list for his food, favorite lists for his favorite toys, favorite list for his favorite films, and I've started doing it for myself as well, right? When something really speaks to my nature or preference. Because ADHD children are sort of carrying around a lot of like baggage all day. There's the emotional baggage, the energetic baggage, the thought baggage. There's just a lot of chaos internally going on. It's very easy for them to lose sense of themselves and to deprioritize what makes them feel good. Like their perception of self is very easily skewed and easily led. Because they're dealing with so much, it's easier sometimes to outsource their sense of self, and their identity can get lost in all of that. So creating favorite lists together brings to consciousness for a child their own preferred things, their own taste in stuff. Also celebrating those things. Like my son got upset this morning because I wanted a different cereal to him. Now, I usually have a different cereal to him, but today he wanted me to have the exact same one. And I kind of stood my ground on it gently and reminded him that what makes him lovable is not being the same as the people who love him, but him being himself. So he can have his Honey Cheerios and I can have my Bran Flakes, and that's what makes us special, that we have differences as well as same things. I go, how is that registering for you? And I asked him directly, does that make you feel like mummy doesn't love you as much if you're not the same as mummy? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, that's not true. It's like, think of all the things about you that are different that I love. And I just listed them all. right? And then I told him all the things that are the same. Now, this is about what he's expressed there is that very core need inside of ADHD children to kind of merge with other people, right? Because it's a quick, safe, deep way to feel connected, right? When they are in deep love of another person, then they do love very deeply, they do attach very deeply. Um, their sense of safety can be removed quite quickly when that person sort of reflects difference, right? But it's important that we reinforce differences and we reinforce uniqueness as being a good thing, right? And showing them that it's okay. One of the statements I repeat to him now is like, I'm different, or I'm just being myself, and that's okay, right? It's like we love to be different. We're allowed to be. We're allowed to like what we like. No one gets to change that. I'm teaching him that no one is an authority on him except him, essentially. So favorite lists are really good, and it's also the child is internally then watching for the things that they love and paying attention to what feels good for them. So then they're more likely to express that later, right? Self advocacy is very much tied to the amount of time that we spend helping ADHD children see themselves. Because if they don't have that, then it can be very difficult to see themselves. So music to match me and music to calm me. I'm going to say match me first. So for children who struggle with interoception, or even alexithymia, where they can't identify emotions at all, using music is a really clear opener for the body to start processing more. It's a safe way to integrate emotion or lost identities, lost parts of themselves, in the longer term as well. That isn't as intrusive as someone questioning or labeling or naming. Simply sitting with emotion can sometimes create a beautiful drama internally that's required to transform their internal world for the long term. And every single instance of felt emotion at depth, no matter how uncomfortable, does change the internal world and change the field of perception and the field of consciousness considerably. Now, pretend play. Doing pretend play with children at certain ages is really important because they get to role play their own feelings, needs, and you get to see things that matter to them. Right? So when you're learning about children, pretend play is really good. Deep question games, like if you could choose between having an eagle's head or pig's trotters on your feet, which would you choose? Or what's your favourite flower? What's your favourite bird? Like I talked about earlier, right? This teaching them to notice themselves, because they'll forget themselves really easily, and it's not good. They're easily controlled, they're easily led, and all of this is about keeping connections with others, and in a safe environment where that connection is secure, then they have the room to maintain a sense of self and to explore that as well. Celebrating child-led choice. Celebrating always when they are honest. Celebrating always when they make a choice. Celebrating always, even if they don't like the choice that they've made, or unless it's an unsafe one, don't intervene. Support what they're choosing, right? The finding calm menu is something I've done with my son recently as well, where you make a list of things that they can do to find their calm, and you do it together. Like get a cuddle or go to the happy place, go upside down. Finn loves to be upside down. Get your shouts out, right, which is the thing we both do, right? Where it's like he bashed me in the eye, right, during the week there with a dragon, and I had to go, ah! And I told him, I'm just going to get my angry out, ah! And I didn't point it at him, just pointed it somewhere else. But he's used to that because he does that for himself as well. He needs to get the big feelings out of his body, and we teach them that language, that emotions are meant to come up and out and be felt. They're not supposed to be kept in, right? And they grasp onto that really easily. It makes perfect sense to them because at that stage of life, their bodies are talking to them all the time, so it's, of course, this is relevant to them, and they can see and feel much, much more than we realize. So educating on sensory needs, big feelings, emotional literacy, and everything I just said there, teaching them as much as possible about their ADHD and about how they might be experiencing it, and hearing from them on how they experience it as well, and letting them have autonomy over how they manage. This is really important. Right, I've written something up there about saying sorry to children. Right, teaching them that mistakes are okay by saying sorry to them. I did in more detail go over that in a previous video, but just to reinforce that point, parenting where there's an authority figure and a lower figure with ADHD is actually teaching a child to outsource, right, their sense of self, and is sort of contributing to this structural dissociation or routinely dissociation on a lower level that they don't need, right? Because then they're not listening to their own self. So by lowering the intensity of that hierarchy, of course, maintain your authority in subtle ways, in loving ways, in present ways, in confidence. You know, make choices for the child that keep them safe, secure, healthy, and well. But in as many ways as possible, show the children, right, that you endeavour to respect them, that you endeavour to give them dignity, that you endeavour to create a situation where you will resolve things and be accountable and be responsible, because it reinforces trust. Being the authority figure doesn't reinforce trust because it's rooted in fear. You induce fear to create an authority figure in that way that is perfect, right? And it's not a healthy construct to create inside of an ADHD child's mind. Hey, religion! Looking at you, church! Right, now let's move on from that. Don't know why I'm doing voices today. Demonstrating healthy boundaries and teaching children that they are authorities on their own self and not anyone else is important. I keep telling my son, when you disagree with mummy, tell mummy. If you don't have to be the same as mummy, it's like if you don't want something or don't like something that I've said, tell me. Like, and you will always be safe to do that. And if anything happens that you don't like, you can tell me too. And I make that safe for him. And I have to be humble and eat my words sometimes because I've taught him to say, you are hurting my feelings when I've done something that's upset him. So then we can open a greater dialogue around things. Like if I say no, he tends to think I'm hurting his feelings by no. No registers as hurt feelings. So we had to have a discussion around, you know, mummy sometimes has to say no for safety reasons. And, you know, like that kind of thing. But at least I've taught him that phrase so he knows that his feelings are being acknowledged in healthier ways. If a child hasn't got emotional literacy around their own hurt feelings as well, if they're not able to express that and we don't teach that explicitly, they can get a bit spiteful. Like even, especially ADHD children, like they'll passive aggressively, they need to tell you that something's okay, and they might do it by hurting you back, right? Because they've been overwhelmed with emotion, and therefore they learn unconsciously the only way people pay me attention is by hurting them back, right? And we don't want children to think like that, do we? No, we don't. So emotional literacy, very big deal there. Okay. Showing sustained, conscious and present interest in the child. Shouldn't be hard, shouldn't need elaborated upon. How sustained, how conscious and how present are we with children? How much more can we be? So much more. Insisting on and advocating for trauma and neurodivergent informed environments for children. Actively removing any influence which negates their safety, autonomy or ability to express their own nature. Regulated and accountable adults only. Boundaries down. That's our role. All of that I just said. Okay, so here are two profiles, right? On one side is a child who trusts himself. On the other side is a child who does not, right? And they have lost themselves or is about to lose themselves to either dysregulation, sensory difficulties, or a long-term systemic issue with dissociation that we want to correct soon, right? So checks with others for their preferences first. Gets visibly upset or panicked if their people choose differently to them, right? That means they're more likely to be controlled, right? They think that the connection is unsafe and that's why they're doing that. Has emotional episodes about choices, right? Struggles to express self, needs or ideas. Struggles with sleep, food or enjoying things. Denies or avoids realities or feelings which are not positive. Running to a screen, looking out a window, suddenly not listening. Appears to suddenly dissociate or switch their views based on the company and the environment or the trigger. That's a massive tell. If there is an unsafe person in the child's life and they switch, right, and you can see that, that's an important thing to recognize. I trust me. Offers their opinions, ideas and feelings and wishes. They make choices easily or discuss the choices, right? Because choices are never easy when you're ADHD. There are so many elaborate ways in which things could go wrong, right? But if they're able to express and communicate on that, that's great. They have preferences and feel safe to indicate them. They like to learn about themselves. They may struggle with being different from safe people, but it's not to the point of creating panic, right? Um, Emotionally honest, right? Open and actively learns about themselves in front of others. There's a celebration of their uniqueness there. And speaking to my original point, here is a little profile of me, right? So this is me when I was small, right? All the different versions when I was little and growing up. And then there's one up on the side there when I was like in my 20s, right? And thought I was the shiz, right? All of this is a direct reflection of my true nature, because as children, this is when they are closest to that. So no matter what has happened in their lives up until whatever point, by going into the emotions, bringing them safety, creating environments of safety, beginning to validate, the body will naturally start to readjust to the new safe parameters, and the child will naturally adjust to new safe parameters as well. We are designed to biologically return to our true natures, and all we need is love, presence, safety and respect, and autonomy too. Right. And we might need a little bit of help getting there, but we all eventually are able to return to our original innocence, because that's what we all are. We are all innocent. We're all innocent. Anything that happens to us here, anything that goes on that causes harm, is just a repeated pattern of something that went on before, right? And it's through a lack of knowledge, right, and a lack of safety and a lack of certainty in the world that these harms come, and this identity loss happens. But it can all be rectified for everyone. No one is a lost cause, and equally, we are all equal in our innocence. So the sooner we can all get back there, the better, frankly. I hope this was a helpful session. I am away to find my own cam now. I don't know what I'm gonna do the rest of today, but I'm sure I'll find something. It's really nice of you to come hang out, and like I said, if you want to watch the rest of the videos, they are all available on YouTube. And if you want to donate to the fundraiser to open our schools, Sincerity Schools worldwide, for all ADHD children and teenagers everywhere, I would be really grateful. Have a lovely day. Bye. See you later. Bye.